Yoshie Shiratori, 1936, Aomori, Japan. Yoshie Shiratori was sentenced to 23 years for a crime he didn't commit. With a corrupt legal system, daily beatings from guards, and prosecutors seeking the death penalty, he knew his only chance was to escape. After months of watching the guards, he discovered a 15-minute patrol gap and stole a metal wire from a bathing bucket the prisoners used to wash themselves. Late at night, he used it to unlock his cell door and managed to escape the facility. To delay discovery, he removed loose wooden floorboards from under his futon bed and arranged them to make it look like he was still asleep. By morning, the guards glanced inside and saw what they thought was Shiratori sleeping. But when they got closer, they found only a pile of wood. He was already gone. 3 days later, he was caught stealing supplies from a hospital and was back in prison. But this time, he was sentenced to life for his escape. But this was just the beginning. After being recaptured and sentenced to life, Yoshie Shiratori was transferred to Akita prison, where he was locked in a special cell built for escape artists. It had high ceilings, smooth copper walls, and a single skylight, making escape nearly impossible. He was kept in handcuffs at all times and endured constant beatings and forced labor, treated even worse than in Aomori. But he never stopped searching for a way out. While scaling the walls at night, he noticed the wood holding the skylight bars was rotting. Each night, he loosened the vent little by little until he could finally pry it open, but his handcuffs remained a problem. Every night he removed them, carefully working the locks until he could move freely, then put them back on before morning to avoid suspicion. Since footsteps on the roof would alert the guards, he waited for a stormy night to cover the noise. On June 14, 1942, as rain and wind pounded Akita prison, he removed his handcuffs one last time, climbed out through the skylight, and escaped. For 3 months, he wandered, weak and starving. Desperate, he went to the home of a guard from Akita prison who had once treated him kindly, hoping for help. But instead, the guard turned him in, and Shiratori was captured once again. This time, there was no mercy. Shiratori was transferred to Abashiri prison in Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost and most secure prison. There, he was thrown into an open cell exposed to the freezing cold, ensuring he was too weak to resist the regular beatings from guards. Later, he was placed in specially made handcuffs and leg irons, designed to be so secure that a specialist had to spend 2 hours unlocking them once a week for his bath. Knowing brute force wouldn't work, Shiratori came up with a plan. During meal deliveries, he dripped miso soup on the handcuffs, leg irons, and food slot, letting the salt slowly corrode the metal over time. After months of weakening the restraints, he finally saw his chance. On August 26, 1944, he broke apart the rusted handcuffs and leg irons, freeing himself completely. Then, he dislocated both of his shoulders, allowing him to squeeze through the narrow food slot in his cell door. Taking advantage of the wartime blackout, he slipped into the darkness and escaped. For 2 years, he survived in an abandoned mine deep in the mountains. When he finally descended to a nearby village, he learned that Japan had surrendered and the war was over. Believing he could now live peacefully, he attempted to steal a tomato from a farm to survive. However, the farmer caught him in the act and attacked him. In self-defense, Shiratori stabbed the man, unintentionally killing him. He was later captured and sent back to prison. This time, he wasn't just an escapee. He was now a murderer facing a death sentence. For his previous escapes and the farmer's murder, Shiratori was sentenced to death by the Sapporo District Court and sent to Sapporo Prison, where he was placed in a specially designed escape-proof cell with high ceilings, thick walls, and windows too small to fit through. Determined to prevent another escape, 6 guards monitored him 24/7. Knowing he could dislocate his shoulders, they shrunk the food slot so only his head could fit through, ensuring he had no way out. Convinced he was finally trapped, the guards stopped handcuffing him and focused only on securing the ceiling, unaware that he had other plans. While they watched above, Shiratori worked below. Using miso soup bowls, he dug a tunnel beneath his cell, scraping away the earth night after night. After months of digging, he slipped through the tunnel and escaped, pulling off his 4th and most daring prison break right under the guards' feet. With post-war Japan in chaos, police had bigger concerns than hunting fugitives, allowing Shiratori to remain hidden for a year. One day, as he sat in a park, a police officer sat beside him and, without knowing who Shiratori was, offered him a cigarette, a rare luxury in a struggling nation. After years of hunger, beatings, and escape attempts, this simple act meant more than words. Overwhelmed, he admitted his identity and surrendered. The High Court of Sapporo ruled the farmer's death was self-defense, revoking his death sentence and sentencing him to 20 years for his escape. Transferred to Fuchu prison in Tokyo, he served 14 years before being paroled in December 1961. Enjoying the video? If you've watched this far, why not like and subscribe? The squeeze-through escape. In 2012, Choi Gapbok, a yoga master with 20 years of practice, was arrested for robbery and locked in a detention cell in South Korea. For 5 days, he studied his surroundings, waiting for the right moment. In the early hours of his escape, he did something crazy. He dislocated both of his shoulders, then carefully applied skin ointment to his upper body and squeezed through the tiny food slot at the bottom of his cell, which measured just 5.9 inches tall and 17.7 inches wide. He slipped out in just 34 seconds. His years of yoga had made his body so flexible that he could contort himself in ways others couldn't. However, he had tricked the guards into giving him the ointment, claiming it was for a skin condition, never suspecting it would aid his escape. Before leaving, he arranged pillows pillows under blankets to make it look like he was still sleeping. Meanwhile, all 3 guards on duty were fast asleep, unaware of what had just happened. By the time they discovered his empty cell, Choi Gap-bok had already vanished into the night. The Bangkok Hilton escape. David McMillan, a London-born drug smuggler, was arrested in Melbourne in 1982 for trafficking hashish using a bag duplication system. Convicted of conspiracy to import heroin, he was sentenced to 17 years in prison but was released on parole in 1993. While on parole, he fled to Thailand using a fake passport but was soon arrested in Bangkok's Chinatown for heroin trafficking. He was locked up in Klong Prem's Central Prison, nicknamed the Bangkok Hilton, a facility notorious for overcrowding, corruption, and brutal conditions, where prisoners often spent decades or died behind bars. McMillan quickly realized survival meant more than just serving time. It meant escaping before it was too late. Then, his luck finally ran out. He was sentenced to death. Knowing he would soon be transferred to Bangkwang Central Prison, where executions were carried out quickly, he understood that if he didn't escape now, he never would. Determined to survive, he smuggled in hacksaws and spent weeks silently cutting through his cell bars. And finally, in August 1996, during the night, he cut through the bars and slipped into the prison corridors. But escaping his cell was just the first step. Klong Prem's security made McMillan pass through 7 obstacles, climbing walls, getting over barbed wire fences, squeezing through partitions, and staying out of sight from guards. He got past the last high-security fence, then climbed the outer wall using a bamboo ladder left by maintenance workers. Once outside, he quickly changed into civilian clothes, grabbed an umbrella, and calmly walked away, blending in with the early morning crowds.